Welcome everyone to our webinar today. I'm Emily Rapley, Managing Editor with Becker's Healthcare. We will begin today's webinar with a presentation and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. We look forward to hearing your questions. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link you used to log into today's webinar to access the recording. At this time, I'm pleased to turn the floor over to our presenters, Randall Kendricks of Canon USA Healthcare Business Development, and Ed Stevens from Canon Healthcare Consultant and former Cerner executive, to begin today's presentation.
Good morning, evening, or night, depending on where you are. As we've been introduced, I'm Randall Kendricks with Canon USA, and I'll let Ed introduce himself real quick so you know the voice.
And I will be the second voice today. I'm Ed Stevens, consultant to Canon's Healthcare Division.
We are going to focus today specifically on managed devices as a service. We've all heard the term, the SaaS, the software as a service. It's become quite the vogue process now to turn the hardware, just as we've done with our software over the years, as a service. It just doesn't make sense to have them as a separate piece. So we're going to jump into that, but real quickly, if you don't already know Canon, I'll give you just a brief overview of who we are. I'm sure most, if not all, know who we are. Canon USA, we are headquartered in Melville, New York. Any given day, there's plus or minus 200,000 employees, and we operate in all over the world with actually 30 plus almost $40 billion in revenue at this point in time. Most of you may know, but if not, we are certainly famous for our cameras, print engines. But if you don't know, more recently, I'd say in the past, say 15 years, we've now flipped over into medical imaging, X-ray, MRI, and then we have our own leasing company within Canon that leases any and all of our softwares or equipments. The two more recent acquisitions, I'd say it's no more than the last 6 years. The most recent one would be Toshiba Medical. If you did not know that, Canon purchased all of Toshiba's medical unit out of Japan. That was 2016, and that's been fully implemented and now included in our entire company-wide processes. So some of that you can see on the left-hand side, the topography, the magnetic, ultrasound, X-ray, and a bunch of other equipment that goes along with that, also the services and software side of that. That name of Toshiba branded products will probably stay for the distant future. If you see that on some of your equipment in your hospital, that's now owned by Canon and managed by that. So the other one is, and I tell you these two very specifically, would be the Access camera, which is actually over in Hollywood, Florida, over here, so not too far from where I live in Florida. That also is a very interesting play for us because it includes a lot of medical that most of us did not even know. And matter of fact, I have a resident expert in my group here, Ed Stevens. Ed, quickly tell them, it was a few years ago, how we ran into Access, and I had no idea it really even made a difference in healthcare, but I'll yield the floor to you, and you tell them what it means and what we can do, at least in some areas, with that.
Certainly. The most interesting piece of this, and we were attending the Canon Expo in New York, where the acquisition had just occurred, and Access was there demonstrating some of their technology. But the part that really caught my eye was, as you think about video conferencing or remote appointments with your physician and doing that via video broadcast, the Access technology actually allowed a much smaller requirement of network bandwidth to have the same interactive video between a physician and their patient, or any of those types of appointments that you would want to have remotely. The way they do this is, if you think of any video picture, you've got the foreground, if you will, of the motion or the person, and then you've got the background of, say, in a physician's office, the wall behind them with their diplomas and their computer and things. And what the video does is it does different sampling rates of the data in those two pieces of that video. So the background is sampled at a much smaller rate. So instead of, at a 60 hertz rates, it's only maybe done at 20 or 15. And then the foreground of the person that's speaking to the patient, or speaking in general there, would be sampled at a normal rate. And what that did was that reduced the amount of bandwidth required for the video broadcast, and in this case over the internet, down by about 75%. So it was 25 to 30% the normal bandwidth requirement to do that type of video. So organizations that are looking to do more telehealth or communications or remote appointments, things of that nature, this technology could actually be a huge savings and offer a much better interaction, as the solution then wouldn't ever digitize the broadcast or necessarily have the same sound issues that you get in a full bandwidth type of presentation. I'll leave it at that, Randall.
That's good. No, thank you, because I would have completely messed that up. So thank you very much. Let me tell you that maybe we should have started here, but I'll tell you who we are real quick. Randall Kendricks, Healthcare Business Development Manager. I've been here actually today is my 23rd year anniversary. Ed, my counterpart, as we were just telling some of the Beckers folks, Ed and I have been associated with each other for 20 plus years. He has just recently stepped down as an executive with Cerner. So he knows our EHR business better than I will ever know it. So any and all those questions, please feel free to start submitting those as you get there, because he's got a wealth of knowledge. Anyway, that's who we are. Honestly, why do you care? We don't know. We'll find out if you care or not in a little bit, but that's who we are, and we'll trudge forward here. We have done some significant healthcare research, and just to give you an idea, our desired canon is to be either one or two market share in each category in which we reside and make products in. That's not taken lightly. It's not taken as a joke or just, we just want market share just to be the big guy. We want to be the best. That's absolutely. So here is some of the research I started 3.5 years ago. You can see, obviously, there's a lot of travel in that. But there are some of those facilities that we've done some significant things in. So, sorry, phone went dead for a second. Those are the research areas across the country. So we've done a lot. And here's what we found from just the healthcare side. We can do all the print and the camera side and all that as well. But here's specifically what we found with the healthcare side. And I don't think this is going to be a surprise to anyone. Obviously, expenses are rising. People are overworked. It's nuts. You guys know it better than we do. But those are just some of the things that we found as a 90+%. Those are the things that we reoccurringly hear after we have done our surveys. Again, these are not going to be new to you guys, but obviously overwhelmed, overworked is an understatement for anyone in healthcare. Regulation, which few of us can help. Litigation, I've learned a lot about litigation just in the last couple of years that just still shocks me. The technology changes is an interesting one because it's what you need, it's what you do, it's what's required to help forward patient care and healthcare. But it's certainly something that stops us all in our tracks at times because you have to stop and learn it, or you have to continue to try to do it the way you've always done it. Administrative responsibilities obviously just continue to rise, and then obviously with the overwork comes with the burnout. And then profit and loss, It's interesting to me. I kind of relate healthcare much to professional sports now. They have marketing departments. They're recruiting much like you would for a sports team. The best doctors, the best nurses, the best of everything, right? So it kind of reminds me of that model, and it wasn't always that way, as we all know.
If I could jump in there real quick, Randall, just wanted to address
yes.
one of those previous bullets. If you can back that up. There we go. The technology changes. Part of what I got to see from the EHR side of things in many cases was that it felt like to physicians and clinic organizations that the system was slowing them down. And one of my observations there was that the folks that actually had the time to be trained really well and get to know the system actually found that it saved them time. But the issue was that initial adoption and desire to jump in and really learn what the solution could do for them. And there's a bit of a saying in the software industry that 75% of the people only use 25% of the capability of the system, and I believe that to be very true. So even as folks move forward with technologies and software, at least making the effort to make sure folks truly do learn the solutions, I think they'll find a great benefit there. And then one of the pain points here, that technology increase can be reduced and provide more value then to your organization. Go ahead there, Randall.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that, because you're right. I would ask you questions throughout the years. What are we doing? And obviously, once those folks implement, it is better, but it is a leap at times to get there. On the EHR side, I don't think this is a shock to anyone, but the expenses were far greater than initially thought, or even planned in some instances. I learned a lot from the Becker's folks the last 3 years about that particular piece of it. They're always complex. Implementations are always longer. That's not anything new. Efficiencies just weren't there in some respects, and that could be selling and or end user. It could be either one or both. And then we all know about interoperability. I won't even touch that, because that could, it's a firestorm to just talk about. And then mergers, it's always a problem, especially when you're running dual systems. And I'm just feeling in my spirit right here that there's a bunch of people screaming right now with dual systems. So I apologize if you have dual. Some of the feedback, and folks, I don't take most statistics too seriously, so some of these came from our direct, some of these come from Gartner, some of these come from IDC. They're a little bit of a mixture, so I don't necessarily put statistics in concrete, but some of them are pretty generic, and I think probably somewhat accurate in most cases. But here's what we're seeing, and again, remember, we're coming from it from a hardware stance, and then we've got Ed's expertise on the software, and they do cross at times, but for the most part, hardware is hardware and software is software. But we're seeing a ton of overrun in contracts. The more devices, the more complex contracts get. And this is not just for what we do. This is all hardware pieces in their hospitals. Unused, up to 70% sometimes unused supplies, devices, just sitting around unaccounted for. Maintenance costs uncovered, just unbelievable. You think you get a contract done, and then all of a sudden there's another building or there's another department that just wasn't caught, and now there's a cost to that, and it's over and above what you've contracted to do. In IT, it tends to be, look, we prefer to buy new because there's usually no questions about it for the first 3 or 4 years. It's just easier that way. And that's not a shot at IT. That's just a simple fact, and it makes sense. You have an older device, you're gonna have more problems, right? More and more is thrown at IT. Sometimes that's good, and sometimes other times it's not. I specifically went after this point right here called asset tracking for the better part of a year, and found out that a lot of software, EHR software companies include it or have a module for it. But for the past 2 years, I've found not a single entity that had implemented it to anywhere near its capabilities. Most noted that it was complex, or getting it up and running would be a seriously complex process and long process. It's expensive. We also found out things kind of a generic GPOs. You get it from I hate it to oh we love it, and it's all in between. So the GPOs are kind of all over the board. And then let me just pound on us vendors for a moment. Some of us, meaning all of us, tend to sell the deal, and then it's like, yep, you're on your own. Good luck with that. Although the sales guy probably promised you the sun and the moon and the stars, it just doesn't normally work out that way. And reconciliation is almost impossible in most applications because people come and go, contracts expire, they're not coterminous. There's just all kinds of things that jump in with that. Ed, did I miss anything in that conversation? Because I know you and I've had these conversations over the years. Is there anything that I'm missing from the hospital aspect?
Well, I think the one most germane to our topic today is around IT and their responsibilities, as the HRs and as the other solutions, whether it's RevCycle or whatever it might be, continue to roll out. The breadth of what they're responsible for just becomes unmanageable. Most organizations either don't have enough IT staff to be able to manage the scopes associated with their implementations, even on the software side. So the hardware is just and the technology behind that kind of becomes something that they're going to take for granted a little bit, and doesn't get the attention that it may need. Your asset tracking point is very spot on to that, in that there's probably very good systems to help them track those assets. But that's not the priority of the IT organization. Priority for them is to get the technologies and solutions and the software rolled out to the end user so their organizations become more efficient and potentially provide better care then with more data that the software provides them. So it gets a little bit overlooked in that way, and that's part of what we're going to talk a little bit more to here as we go through this. One of your other bullets there, training, very much what I was saying there a moment ago is that there's so much more opportunity to understand the breadth of what the solutions actually do that there's just not time for it. And we the vendors recognize that the folks that are going to be using these systems, they're doing their job today. They don't have huge windows of time just to go dedicate to these things, but it becomes a priority that this can't be ignored to truly get the value back out of the solutions and technologies that your organizations do buy and use then.
Okay, thank you. So our desire at this point is to help clean up some of that confusion. I think for so many years in my career that we focused on just making sure that those devices are out there, that you're up and running, that everybody's happy at the moment. But as things become more complex, that's not the end of it. So as software is managed, hardware it has to follow the same path. We're being screamed at from a corporate standpoint. You have to bring products and services to market that takes that burden off our folks. So some of those things that we hear obviously are the client wants devices that can provide multiple input capabilities, not just a singular functionality. Centralized control from an IT standpoint is absolutely, I don't even know how we can bring a product out anymore that doesn't have some ability to remotely or at least view or manage devices online. And for the most part, we're not bringing those devices out. And it needs to be seamless. It doesn't matter if it's my brand, your brand, everybody else's brand. It all has to work together in some way. Are they online at the moment? Part of that problem that we've had, I guess, with just keeping track of things is we have no idea where a lot of this stuff is. You get the larger entities, even in my own building right there in New York, there's thousands and thousands of people there that manage hundreds and hundreds of the devices. And sometimes you don't even know. There might be a device that you could have used down the hall, but no, you went to the basement to find it. You just don't know. Monitoring, checking status at the time is a great way for IT to be able to quickly check something and make sure it's not just a quick user error. No workstations. I'm assuming most folks know about the dummy terminals, thin clients, whatever you want to call it. That has become one of the top questions we get on a daily basis is, I just need these devices to do what we want them to do, and then I don't want any, obviously, data on it. That patient data is obviously critical. And then if someone were to take it, or if it goes bad, it's just simple to replace it, right? And they want to know who created jobs on the devices, who, what, where, when, how. We all know that from HIPAA and other laws. Some of the applications, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, but some of those applications that we work with on a frequent basis are nurses' desks, capture, registrations. HIMSS levels attainment have become quite a large part of what we deal with on a monthly, yearly basis. Regulatory is never going to stop. There's just no way. It's like the sun coming up. It's just going to be there. Pharmacy order management. And I'm quite surprised. I started selling fax machines 30-something years ago. I'm always surprised to find fax machines, but I was just in a hospital just a few weeks ago, and there's an entire room, a bank full of fax machines that are still on fire all day long. So just when I think the technology is gone, it's still around in many, many locations, not just one or two. It seems to be pretty prevalent out there. I will not get into too much specific about our model numbers, but if you see these numbers or if it makes sense for you to ask a question about them, again, we don't want to get into specs and features of anything, but some of the popular like scan devices we use in this in our world would be network scanners. One of ours is called ScanFront 400, and then we have USB scanners that we connect to obviously all day long, the 260 and the 225. But the approach is real simple. You're demanding as a industry, as a vertical, I need you to take this stuff and make it work. My clinicians and doctors don't have the time nor the desire to learn everything you need us to learn about the product or manage that device. So we need things that are simpler. We need things that are managed by someone else and you're responsible for it. And the products and services that go with that, you need to soup to nuts take care of that. So one of the things that we see a lot of, and scanners are still very much part of what we do, it's in such high demand. I think the EHR providers were very, very good initially once they sold or implemented a system providing some type of capture device. But then as the years go on, devices age, it's just not their focus. They're focused on making that software and that patient data work, right? We're seeing a lot of aging. We just recently seen some Win 10 applications that the product was old enough that it just doesn't have the capability to work with Windows 10 anymore. So there's all kinds of things. So it's not a shot against the EHR guys. It's just a fact. They did that up front, but it's really not what they do on a daily basis. So now we've got devices that need to be managed and updated.
And if I can there on that one.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah,
yes, go ahead.
I got several thoughts to add on this one. But just to kind of talk about the approach a little bit, one of the other big things here is that as the consolidation of healthcare organizations continue to occur, that physician clinics and remote organizations are being bought up by centralized acute organizations and then being pulled into the fold and tied into the EHR. And now you've got all this distribution of capture technologies or needs to capture the technology information and paper-based information out there. That's kind of where the application piece of this slide applies. Is we've got all the paper that comes in at the registration and nurse's desk for it could be your insurance cards, it could be history and physical document from a physician, it could be other outside record information, et cetera, that needs to be brought in and made part of the record very quickly. And then the devices in that distributed mode then become farther physically and less accessible to the IT organizations. Kind of back to some of the demands of what they're looking for is that remote management, the capability to deal with devices that aren't physically on their site, but the and yet can be controlled, configured, and managed through a centralized software to provide the appropriate services then to those distributed organizations. Your pharmacy order and your fax activity there, it's been amazing to me the last 5 to 7 years. As part of what I was doing at Cerner was walking through organizations, helping them identify all the outside documents that were coming into their facilities as a fax in many cases, in some cases mail and other paper, some courier stuff, etc. But the fax was very common in very many different workflows. Your same-day surgery, outpatient surgery activities that require an updated history and physical 24 hours before that surgery can occur. There was huge opportunities for savings and process benefit there by having electronic receipt of that fax into a system that then you could post it into the record and not delay any outpatient surgery or even reschedule it in worst case. But the paper of that nature and many other workflows that we found that these technologies or the distributed technologies can help with placing, like the network scanner out at that remote physician's office. So once the document is done, if it's done in a handwritten form or some other non-electronic method, he could instantly scan it into the system and add it then appropriately. But many opportunities with the solutions that we're talking about and the approach that we're talking about from a remote managed, outsourced, serviced solution in the technology that can be used here would bring a lot of benefit to an organization and help an IT group as well. Randall, go ahead.
Thank you. Ed gets to give some personal experience there. I know some of it. he gets to see a lot more of that on a day-to-day basis than I do. Again, I don't think this is just kind of I'm a word picture kind of guy, so it just helps me to put words with pictures to kind of nail down. I love this one. I don't even remember where this came from, but I think I borrowed it, plagiarized it from someone. But it literally, the hospital just looks like just this giant fountain of things that profits and everything leaking out of it. But end of life, asset tracking, cost controls, and anything that we can talk about today, we can include our scanners, our printers, our medical. Doesn't limit us. We keep talking about scanners. It's just what we do a lot of, but it applies to lots of things in there. So upkeep, facilities, payroll, those are things that we can't fix right there, but kind of an idea of what we can do with it. So this is another great picture. Sorry, a picture's worth 1,000 words. These are actual pictures, and these happen to be, just quickly, printers and print cartridges. These are actual pictures of places that either one of my vendors or myself have been, and these are unused or unaccounted for devices. Real live stuff that we didn't make up, just it's sitting there in a location, and no one has an idea.
Yeah, and we found in some of the walkthroughs that I had done, we would find closets that in some cases the scanner that had been placed out on a nursing station, the users decided it wasn't worth the space it was taking on the counter, and they would put it in the closet, and IT would have no idea, but the HIM organization eventually would be getting the paper that was supposed to be being scanned there on an interactive basis sent to them, and then they eventually would figure out that the organization wasn't using the technology provided. That's another one of the benefits of some of the tools that we're offering or going to be talking about more, is the ability to know that the volume's coming from that location and the activity still occurring there, and even down to the user level as to who's creating the information coming into the system, as they should be, versus hiding something they don't want to use in a closet.
Mm-hmm. We do see a lot of stuff. So our entire desire here is not to sell you something. It is literally to help you get from point A to point B, because here's what we're learning. We sold you a bunch of stuff as humans years and years and years, and now all that stuff has been working fine, but now it's either out of date or needs to be upgraded. But this continual process of just coming in and getting a check from you, those days have relatively have passed. So as part of repairing some of those leaks, we offer to manage products such as scanners, printers, medical equipment, asset tracking, end of life, cost control, and then as we are implementing those other two companies, we're going to continue to add products to that. And in real life, my next slide should tell you, our entire goal is to save money. On average, we have been at 25 to 35%. If we can't, we don't even go down the road. We just tell you, look, you've got a great system. It works great. Keep trucking the way you are. These are hard costs. This is not a fluff cost. We look at actual hard dollars. And then I'll get very specific on this next one. We have a process. So the whole idea here is for you to be able to take the current technology, whatever that is, it's a scanner, it's a printer, whatever that is in your organization, and you turn that over to us. We would assess that building, hospital, buildings, multiple locations, whatever that area of need is. It is thorough. I would say that, and I'll read it exactly. It's not intrusive. We don't beat your people up, but we look at those devices, and then we create a plan of attack. So let's just say it's scanners. We do a lot of that. I hate to keep harping on that, but that's what we do a lot of. Go into a building with a couple thousand scanners in it. We will assess to make sure that we don't miss anyone. Go through those devices. What's up to date? Is it a Canon brand? Is it a non-Canon brand? Is it this brand? How do we manage that? Put that all together, present that plan of attack to you, and then once those attack plans are created, we present that, agreements are made, and then we implement that. Now, here's the fun part for us. The rest is really on us. Our contractual agreements are pretty strong. Installation, management, training, service, supplies. There's a funny little term in there called OOPS devices care. We actually cover, as a general rule, a certain percentage of, oh, we knocked one off a cart. Oh, we spilled coffee in it. Someone stole one. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we do in there. Ongoing maintenance, end of life management. We don't want you having old technology in a new system. Software upgrade, firmware, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, however you want the status reports to come in. The desire, and Ed can expand on this, the desire here is to, as a vendor, come to you and say, whatever those devices are, whatever we choose, we will manage that. It's on us now. No longer your problem. All you need to do is use them, and when your folks need to be trained, we take care of the rest. Ed, am I missing anything? It's a real simple process, but it gets complicated is how we implement just based on the product.
Well, I think, and you may have mentioned this, some of the components of the overall program would be the remote management and configuration tools, and user tracking and login reports, things out of those as well that can provide the IT organization a number of new capabilities to deal with and manage the technology better on their own. But then the intent of the program is that they don't have to then physically go out to the location if the device needs a repair or a firmware update or something of that nature. If there's a physical touch to it, the program can offer a 7/24-hour hot swap, or if we're doing a true managed service event, then the rep would come out, pull one out of a inventory, replace the broken one, and bring it back up, and then work with the IT guy to reload the particular profile onto that device so that it's now right back into business where it was before, with no major effort of IT to go out to that particular location in that distributed capture mode. But really just the intent is to address a number of those pain points in that process of the distributed fleet of technologies that continue to expand in the organizations, and make that an easier process for the IT folks, for the clinicians using it, for the administrators in the organization, move it from a capital budget cost into an operational budget cost so that the budgeting around that works better and is easier to manage as well. There's a handful of other benefits that we can address around it, but it really is just that. Hopefully, it's a tool that can be used to make everything work cleaner and better for the organization, and take that technology management burden off of their plate.
Thank you, sir. My second to last slide here is this is just one of our floor plans that we put together. We do happen to make these available to our users. Just to give you an idea, we kind of give you a floor plan of where your devices are, what's being managed, what's not, that kind of thing, if that's of interest to anyone. But like Ed said, there are a number of ways to engage us if this is interesting to you, and there are lots of ways to do that. But I will now open it up, if you don't mind, to question and answer, and then I'll just mute myself here and be quiet, and we'll wait for the answer or the questions to come in.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Randall and Ed. That was a great presentation. So we will now begin the question and answer session. If you have a question for Randall or Ed, please submit those through the Q&A box on your dashboard. We'll try to get through as many questions as we have time for today. So it looks like we have a number of questions already coming in here. Let's start with this first one here. We have an audience member who asks about becoming a paperless medical office or medical group. So their question is, what is required to have a paperless medical office or medical group? Are there established best practices for standardizing formats of non-digital pieces of information, allowing systemic input to EHRs resulting in structured data, etc.? So the question is, what is required to have a paperless medical office or medical?
I'll answer with a funny. First, you need your magic wand, which doesn't exist. I'm sorry, I know you can't respond back and tell me to be quiet, but you know what? I'm going to actually yield the floor to Ed on this one. I know better on the capture side. Ed has so much more experience on the start to finish. Do you mind answering that, Ed? Or, I mean, as best as we can, because there is no such thing as paperless. There are less paper, but there's no paperless, if I'm aware.
Well, yeah, I think the most popular term in the last few years has been paper light, and that's a bit due to the fact that, at least in my opinion, until everyone outside of the office quits using paper, there's always paper going to come into the office. But the real gist of the question here, as I read it, is around the best practices for standardizing how you get information into the system. I think, at least my experience was that the EHR vendor really is going to potentially try to drive that, or at least have some recommendations for you. And then, I'd suggest that have your folks very involved in the process with your EHR vendor and customize that process to what works for you. If you want to address, the thought of specific standard formats of, in your terms, non-digital pieces of information, if the EHR is, built and flexible appropriately, any format of that scanned document should still be able to be attached to the patient's record and then be viewable within the primary record viewer application, and either in its native format or in a format that they may translate it, whether they do OCR, optical character recognition, or transform it into a PDF document, or other methods that go with that, and potentially leaving you then with searchable data as well from that document that can then be attached and become part of the record. So, and in my experience, I worked with organizations that some of those folks for that office, they simply wanted to box up the activities from the day before and ship it to the central HIM, in the primary hospital associated with them and let them manage it into the records. Others did the distributed capture, and what we would, try to represent is that, that network-based ScanFront 400 device to be to a very specific model with a touchscreen mode on it. Can be configured for a scan button that says scanned HIM. So now in that paperless physician office, anyone there that has a document that they know needs to go into that record, they could simply walk over to that device, touch the scanned HIM, drop the paper in, see it go through, get a quick preview, recognize it's all readable, and click send. It would then go into the queue of inbound documents for HIM to manage and associate to the appropriate patient and encounter as documentation within that scanned document, or information in the data in that scanned document would provide them the ability to recognize who that patient was. There could also be a process of a cover sheet generated by the EHR to go with those documents to help automate that, possibly having a barcode for the encounter number, medical record number, other patient identifiers that go with that. But lots of angles on that. Definitely make sure that your physician's offices have the ability to post the documents into the records that are coming in there. And I'll leave that one with that. Hopefully that was a helpful answer. And we'll go to the next question.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ed. That was perfect. Our next question here is about communication between the vendor and the end user. So this question comes from an audience member. They're referring to the healthcare facility feedback slide. So that was slide number 9. And their question is, what this slide says to me is that the communication between the vendor and the user is poor at best. Is there not an opportunity for IT to actually talk with the end user? And the audience member says, administrators and physicians may not always be the best source of information for mundane details, meaning actual common user problems or their vendor opportunities for patient care more. So just to repeat that question, is there not an opportunity for IT to talk with end users?
I would say so. Go ahead, Ed. Go ahead.
Yes, I was going to say yes. There should always be that opportunity. Kind of like I alluded to earlier in the presentation. I think sometimes the opportunity isn't taken full advantage of, and in some cases, other project deadlines and timeframes also, kind of compress the availability to such a point that not enough of that occurs. So, my recommendation would be I'd urge the organizations to, absolutely provide that, and then even after the project is completed and now it's in a live state and users are using the solutions, have that help desk or subject matter experts within the organization or the consultants from the HR vendor that would be available to, have the conversation with the end user of how do you do this? How do you use that extra 75% of the functionality that's not being used to the system? Or what is the shortcut? And I can relate that, at least at Cerner, they did have a best practice and the best workflow kind of recommendations that they would assist in helping clients understand what the solutions could do for them. Now, the scenario that I saw there that I didn't like was that, sometimes that was a little too cookie cutter for an organization, and instead of the organization coming back and saying, hey, that doesn't work for me, what else is out there? That was what didn't occur, is the what else can we do to truly make this process work best for us. So absolutely encourage your organization to demand that additional communication, or add the consulting hours and dedicate those to communication to the IT and end users, so that both sides of the picture know what capabilities there are to help solve problems.
Excellent. Thanks, Ed.
Okay.
Randall, did you want to add anything there?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, excellent. We'll go on to our next question here. So we have an audience member who asks, What software programs do you use to track when contract renewals are coming up?
I'll answer that one real quick, at least from the Canon standpoint. We have some outside vendors such as Property Track, but a lot of ours is an internal piece within our, I mentioned, I forget which slide it was, but I mentioned our Canon leasing division. They have their own, I don't know if they're homegrown or not, but it's their own processes and programs that actually are very, very detailed down to the device and coterminous contracts versus yearly. There's all kinds of really neat information that can be ascertained from those reports. It's probably one of the best that I've seen around, but there are a multitude out there if you're looking for something just for your organization and for yourself that we're happy to follow up with. And if you just need someone, I can certainly provide that to you. So lots of them.
And I'd add to that, part of what we're proposing or discussing here is this outside management solution. And this is absolutely one of the issues, tracking when renewals for maintenance and things of that nature are coming up. One of the issues that we're trying to help eliminate, that if you can use this outsourcing program for your organization and essentially move that technology into a operational budget with a leasing program or something of that nature, the lease renewal would be the only thing that would come up, and that would be under whatever term you defined it, whether that's a 3-year or 5-year or 7-year. And I guarantee you that the organizations are going to be talking about the release renewal or the lease renewal when it comes up. And it could even be structured in such a way that it automatically renews every so many years, unless somebody would step up and say, hey, we're going to terminate for whatever reason. Taking this exact issue off the table, removing that from your IT folks' concerns, and then just having the technology refreshers built into the lease process as it goes. So if the defined end of life or end of useful time frame for this technology is at 3 years on a device that is placed in, then 3 years later, the next generation of that device replaces it as part of the lease. So the renewal issue somewhat goes away from managing the contracts of a maintenance and service perspective.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ed and Randall. Our next question here is about medical device management. So this audience member asks, does your team manage medical devices? And if so, do you only manage Canon, or do you attempt to include Philips or other vendor devices in your contracts?
This is Randall. We are, as of today, it's the office equipment side, but we will soon be adding that medical equipment side to us. There is still a little bit of, I don't know if it's called transition or what the software processes are called, or updates to software from Toshiba. I think some of that got a little bit out of hand, and they're updating that. So I think within a year, or maybe just a little bit less, we will add that to it, but not today.
Excellent. Thank you so much for clarifying that. So this next question here, we have an audience member who asks, are you involved with MDaS agreements where you provide your clients with the reduction of print/click volumes and their related expenses?
That is a very quick yes, we can do that. We do that a lot.
Excellent. Well, that makes it easy for us. Okay, so our next question here, does this allow for capital budget items to be moved to the operational?
Yes, I'll give the brief answer, and then Ed has worked on specifically his side of it. He's had a little bit more details on it. But yes, the whole idea here is to get it out of that capital side. I know, at least for me, in the past 2 years, capital expenditures have become the 4-letter word. Just IT and anyone is afraid to go to the capital budget side to ask for that. So when you run a program like this is all operational budget. Doesn't affect the capital at all. So that's one of the larger benefits that we found out kind of after the fact of not just running it for them, but people say, oh my gosh, I don't have to go ask the folks on the Hill if we can get this done. So Ed, do you have any more to add to that?
Just that in my experience in the healthcare market was that every time you went to a capital budget process, it typically had to have a board approval. And in many cases, the board of the organization only met once a month at most, and sometimes once a quarter. So unfortunately, it immediately created a delay. And then the next part of that was once you went and you presented, if they denied it, then you were delayed again as you're got to go back and get whatever additional documentation and justifications that they were asking for before they would approve this expenditure. Versus almost every organization that we deal with anymore, or we had dealt with, they always have their operational budgets, and submitting a normal monthly expense for technology or process around technology or management of technology into the operational budget really became a much easier, a much cleaner process for every organization. And then it either would have a built-in management structure for increase over time, or a period of length of that process, knowing that 3 years from now that potentially that project ends and that operational budget cost goes away, and at that point you would either be on another solution or another opportunity or some other way to solve that same problem, or resubmitting that potential budget capability again.
Excellent. Thank you so much for clarifying that. So we have just a couple minutes left here. We'll try to squeeze in a couple more questions. Ed and Randall, does this program reduce the responsibility of the IT department to manage the fleet of devices overall?
I believe we see it on a daily basis. Again, Ed can expand on it, but yes, that's the whole desire, is to help you take that one piece of that business, and we can expand those as we go, but one at a time, take as much of that workload off you, and then we get varying degrees of people who want involvement. We have IT departments that just say, forget it. Can you just manage it all? We don't want to deal with it, right? And then we have those that say, I want you to implement, I want you to monitor, I want you to report back, but I want to know what's going on inside my entity. Ed, do you have anything different?
Just that, as you said, it is the intent of it. I think the point I made earlier around the model of distributed capture and the distributed healthcare environment, and the consolidation of clinics and clinic organizations into acute organizations, the simple geographic distribution of those devices now. If an IT organization representative needs to go out and touch a device at one of those remote facilities, the cost for that activity on a daily basis, just a one-day trip out and back, can reach into the thousands of dollars. So the ability to have a remote management software, a device that's intelligent out there, a device that's easily swapped in and out and reconfigured, absolutely addresses reducing the effort and responsibilities of the IT organization to a manageable level now. Whereas before, if you had 90 clinics and each clinic has a batch capture device, and each one of those has to be touched to upgrade the software or to have a new higher speed scanner associated with it, say it did cost, if it cost $500 for the day trip for the resource to be out of pocket doing its normal IT activities, but to go out to do that single process at a site, that's $45,000 to go upgrade those 90 different clinics. So very quickly you can get into significant amounts of money saved by simply having a remote management process and a smart technology on the other end.
Excellent. So this next question here, I think, really speaks to some of the smaller organizations who may be on the line. We have an audience member who asks if there's a minimum number of devices required for the
It depends on, there's a yes and a no. I'm sorry to do that to you, but it depends on kind of where you want to. We include a lot of small organizations, and as a general rule, we probably put it at around 100, quote, devices. But again, if those devices are large end devices, that could be far fewer. But as a general rule, we would say probably bed-wise, Ed, is there anything that associates number of devices with beds that you could kind of guesstimate at right there?
Well, I'm going to jump back on my geographic disbursement bandwagon again and say that, you know, yeah, there may be a minimum number that would make sense to do this type of leasing and management program, but that could be across your organization. So, you know, if you're a physician's office that's associated with a huge acute facility of, you know, 200 beds or more, and they have the needs for the devices, I think we roll all this into one bigger picture type of program, and then show a larger savings across the organization. And meeting a minimum number then at that point probably does not become a real issue. It's simply a matter of looking at all the places that this program can provide benefit, whether that's your business office and administrative organizations, or your clinical sides, or the clinics, or physician offices, mail room, you know, dietary, whoever it might be. Anybody that's got documents and paper that needs to be managed into a system, not necessarily the EHR, but whether that's your revenue cycle systems, or it could be your EHR and your clinical, it could be you know, simply your registration system, you know, depending on how your organization's IT infrastructure is put together as well. Then, you know, looking at across the bigger picture as to how this could enable your organization to work with IT and make them more efficient and more responsive to the technology needs associated. There's a lot of opportunity there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for clarifying that. And it looks like we just have about 2 minutes left, so we have time for one more question. I think this is a great one to end on. So, Ed and Randall, how do you move forward with this type of program?
There's an easy way. We will provide you, and I'm sorry we did not put that in the presentation, our contact numbers. It's certainly simple. Start it with a conversation, and then if you have a specific product that you want us to look at, or an overall, we can start the conversation, and then it usually moves into an assessment process. Assessments can be, you know, anywhere from a few days to a couple of weeks, depending on the size of the entity. After that, it just progresses into the next conversation, which is what ultimately do we want to do from this assessment? Is it parts of it? Is it all of it? Pieces or parts? So that's pretty much how we do it.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Randall. And that is all the time we have for today. So I do want to thank Randall and Ed for that excellent presentation, and Canon USA for sponsoring today's webinar. To our audience, please enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to having you join us for future webinars.